Emma wiped a bead of sweat from her brow as she tucked her son, Jacob, into his small bed. The cramped apartment was quiet now, the hum of the city outside softened by the thick curtains she had hung herself. The worn wallpaper peeled slightly in the corners, a testament to years of hard work and little leisure. She had spent the day juggling 2 jobs, answering emails from the tutoring center while trying to prepare a simple dinner. Exhaustion settled deep into her muscles, but she pushed it aside, reminding herself that tomorrow could be better. A sudden knock at the door startled her. She wasn't expecting company, especially at this late hour. Emma hesitated, her heart fluttering. Who could it be? She peeked through the peephole and saw a man in a crisp suit holding a thin, official-looking envelope. Cautiously, she opened the door a crack. "Good evening, ma'am. My name is William Preston. I'm a lawyer with Dunham and Associates," he said, his voice polished but distant. "May I come in for a moment?" Emma clutched the doorframe, wary. "Is this about the rent?" she asked softly. "No, he paused, as if weighing how much to reveal. "It concerns your family. A matter that requires your attention." Her eyes narrowed. She'd heard of strangers showing up with dubious schemes before. But something in his demeanor suggested this was different. He looked professional, serious. "What kind of matter?" Emma asked, her voice trembling slightly. "It's about an inheritance," William said, producing the envelope. "You've been named an heir to a considerable estate. I'm here to guide you through the process." Emma's breath caught. Inheritance? From whom? The words sounded foreign in the quiet life she knew, a life built on endless struggle and shielded from luxuries. Her thoughts raced. Could this be real, or just another cruel joke? Emma stood frozen in the narrow hallway, the soft glow of the hallway light casting shadows on the worn floorboards beneath her feet. The unexpected news from William Preston clung to the air between them, thick and almost unbelievable. The idea of an inheritance from a family she barely knew, or perhaps never knew at all, felt surreal, like a sudden chapter ripped from a book she had never opened. "I don't understand," Emma whispered, clutching the doorframe as if it might anchor her. "I don't have any family, not like this. No money or anything like that." William nodded, his expression unreadable but firm. "According to the documents, you are the legal heir to an estate left by your grandfather. It seems the connection was lost over time." Emma let out a shaky breath and closed the door gently. "I'm not sure I believe this." Her voice cracked. "How do I know this isn't some kind of scam?" He offered a small smile. "That's understandable. You can verify everything through the firm. But I assure you, the inheritance is quite real." His fingers gripped the envelope tightly. As the minutes ticked by, Emma found herself caught between skepticism and the intoxicating possibility that her life might change. Still, the man's insistence that she come with him to the law office the very next day unnerved her. "I don't know if I can just leave work, or even trust this," she said, wringing her hands nervously. William leaned against the doorframe. "The paperwork requires your signature, and there's a time limit on your claim. I understand your hesitation, but this is important. Ignoring it could mean losing the inheritance altogether." Emma's thoughts spiraled as she considered the stakes. She thought of Jacob's future, the endless bills piling up, and the future she struggled to see in the dim apartment light. Still, a part of her couldn't help but fear a trap. Later that evening, Emma dialed her closest friend, Sarah, her voice barely above a whisper. "Sarah, something weird happened today. A lawyer came to the door, told me I'm named in a will, like an inheritance." Sarah paused, processing the news over the line. "Are you serious?" "Emma, that sounds huge. But, do you think it's legit?" Emma shrugged, though Sarah couldn't see it. "I don't know. It feels like a mistake or a trick." And the guy wants me to come to this office tomorrow to sign papers. Are you gonna go? Sarah asked. Emma hesitated, swallowing the lump in her throat. Maybe. But what if it's a scam? What if I get into trouble? Sarah's voice was steady, grounding. Look, I know you don't have much faith in luck, but this could be a fresh start for you, and Jacob. Just be careful. Ask questions. Don't sign anything you don't understand. The night stretched on with Emma torn between hope and fear. She wondered what her neighbors might say if they heard. Throughout the day, whispers and sideways glances had replaced the usual greetings and friendly smiles. News traveled fast in their community, and gossip was a persistent creature. That afternoon, at the corner store, the cashier raised her eyebrows as she rang up Emma's groceries. Heard about that lawyer visiting you? She asked in a hushed tone. I don't know what to think, Emma replied, avoiding eye contact. People are saying maybe you're blowing smoke, or worse. You never told anyone you had money before, the cashier said quietly, glancing around to make sure nobody was close enough to overhear. Emma clenched her jaw, discomfort twisting inside her chest. She hadn't told anyone about the visit, not because she doubted herself, but because she feared how the news might reshape her fragile world. The thought of being pitted or envied chilled her more than the uncertainty of the lawyer's words. Back in her apartment, she paced nervously, trying to push away thoughts of what this inheritance might mean. Then came the knock again, this time, a sharp knock at the door. She opened it a crack to find Mr. Preston standing there, briefcase in hand and a determined look on his face. Emma, I need you to understand the urgency of this. The paperwork must be signed in person. I'm here to make sure you don't miss out, he said, voice steady but pressing. His presence filled the small space, his tone leaving little room for argument. I'm tired, Emma admitted, touching the wall for support. I'm tired of feeling like I belong nowhere. William's gaze softened slightly, but he remained firm. This is a chance to change that. You don't have to live in doubt anymore. Her eyes searched his for an alternative, but there was none provided. It felt like everyone, the lawyer, the neighbors, even her own resolve, was closing around her, urging her toward a decision she wasn't ready to make. The next morning, Emma found herself at the law office, flanked by polished marble and the hum of fluorescent lights. Around her, the quiet murmur of clerks and the scent of fresh coffee created an atmosphere far removed from her everyday world. She fidgeted with the strap of her simple purse, feeling exposed and out of place in her threadbare jacket. William motioned her to a conference room. All right, Emma, this should only take a little while, he said, flipping open the documents. Someone from the office soon joined them, a middle-aged woman with sharp eyes and a clipboard. They began explaining terms that floated over Emma like incomprehensible clouds: estates, trusts, legal rights, obligations. The language was dense and foreign. Emma's doubts grew louder. She tried to focus, but the pressure to sign quickly mounted. She looked around and noticed glances shared between the staff, their expressions unreadable. She felt like a character in a play she hadn't auditioned for. A thought struck her hard: what if they were all in on some scheme? What if her claim was just a way to manipulate her? Desperate, Emma asked, "Can I take these papers home to review them with someone? I want to understand fully before signing." William's jaw tightened, a flicker of impatience flashing in his eyes. "Usually, we do prefer immediate signatures, but I understand your caution. Just be aware the time frame is short." A knot of fear settled in Emma's stomach. The countdown had already started without her knowing. The lawyer left the room briefly, returning with a glass of water. Emma whispered a thanks, then pulled out her phone, texting Sarah a quick message, not sure what to do. Feeling pressured. Minutes felt like hours as she sat alone with the papers, heart threatening to burst in her chest. Then an unexpected knock came at the door. It was another client along with two suited men who introduced themselves as security. One of them said curtly, "We're here to ensure the appointment proceeds smoothly." Emma blinked, then looked at William. "What's happening?" He shrugged, avoiding her gaze. "Some misunderstandings. Let's keep this moving." Suddenly, the room felt smaller, the weight of scrutiny heavy on her shoulders. The other clients whispered, their eyes bouncing between Emma and the security guards. Murmurs of disbelief rippled through the space. Emma felt tears prickling behind her eyes. She hadn't come here for humiliation but to find clarity and hope. People began to stare openly, their judgments sharp and unspoken. The receptionist's smile froze, the clerks whispered behind hands. Emma felt as if she had become a spectacle for everyone else's amusement. Her humiliation was palpable. Every fiber screamed to flee, but her feet remained rooted. Why was this happening to her? Why was she the focus of ridicule when all she wanted was a chance? The lawyer's tone hardened as he spoke sternly to the security men. "Please escort Ms. Johnson back to the waiting area." Emma shook her head, voice trembling but firm. "No. I haven't done anything wrong." But the men advanced, and the eyes around the room bore into her. The moment hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Emma's spirit teetered on the edge of collapse, and the faces around her blurred into a disapproving chorus. At that instant, she realized the battle wasn't just legal, it was a test of her courage, her will to be seen as more than her past. Everyone was watching. What would she do now? Emma sat rigidly in the uncomfortable leather chair, her palms sweating despite the cool air circulating in the conference room. The murmurs had faded somewhat when William Preston had whispered sharply at the security men to hold back and let her remain. He had no doubt seen the flicker of defiance in her eyes, the flick that raised the room's tension. Taking a deep, steadying breath, Emma met the gaze of the middle-aged woman with the clipboard, Karen, who now regarded her with a mixture of curiosity and professional composure. "Ms. Johnson," Karen began, "I realize this is all very overwhelming. Perhaps it would help if we explained in clearer terms what this inheritance involves." Emma nodded cautiously. "Please," she said softly. Karen leaned forward. "According to the records, your grandfather was a man named Harold Simmons, a businessman with considerable assets and properties. 50 years ago, it seems he became estranged from his family, and your grandmother kept certain connections private, presumably to protect you from certain relatives who might have claimed everything." Emma felt a flicker of disbelief hit her, but something inside clicked. William spoke up. "The details are complex, but the bulk of the estate requires your consent to initiate legal transfer. There is also a clause that mandates active participation in managing parts of the estate, which means you must be involved. That's why we wanted to meet you in person." The words were dense, but Emma's mind was sharpening. She realized she had a choice: stay overwhelmed or try to engage. Curious but wary, she said, "I want to understand this fully. Can you explain what managing the estate requires?" Karen smiled, recognizing her resolve. "Certainly. There are some real estate holdings, a trust fund, and a charitable foundation your grandfather started. Your involvement could mean making decisions about these assets, potentially using funds for community outreach, scholarships, causes he valued deeply." Emma's breath hitched. The mention of scholarships made an impression. She thought of her Jacob's small school, the worn-out books, the students with dreams too big for their circumstances. William glanced at her, surprised. "You seem to be considering this seriously." Emma nodded. "I have a son. His future, it's all I think about. Maybe this could mean something more than just money." The room fell silent for a moment as the weight of her words settled. Then, Karen asked, "Are you prepared to take on this responsibility today?" Emma hesitated before replying, "I want to try." With that, William began to explain the legal documents, but Emma's concentration would surge and falter, the jargon confusing yet slowly unfolding like a puzzle. At one point, William looked at her skeptically. Are you sure this is wise? This process demands time and understanding. Emma, rallying her courage, said firmly, I'm not just some nobody. I want to make this right. Suddenly, one of the clerks walked over with a thick folder. Ms. Johnson, there is a clause here we didn't discuss earlier. It says the heir must prove ability or commitment by completing a task related to the estate's management. Emma blinked in surprise. William rubbed his chin. This is standard for some trusts. A way to ensure the heir is engaged and capable. The word task hung between them. Emma's heart thundered. Karen looked encouraging. I believe the trust specifies your involvement with the foundation. There's a program this week for scholarship candidates, organizing events and overseeing budgets. If you can take the helm, even briefly, it will fulfill that clause. The room's atmosphere shifted. This was not just paperwork. It was a challenge, a test. Emma felt a surge of panic flickering, but more than that, a surge of hope. Hope that she could prove herself, that her life's hardships had indeed given her strength and skill. I'll do it, she said, nodding. William raised an eyebrow, a mixture of surprise and respect in his expression. Very well. I'll arrange for you to meet the foundation's coordinators tomorrow morning. Karen smiled. They've heard about you already, Miss Johnson. You might be the surprise they're hoping for. Emma's mind reeled. The thoughts of her simple apartment, her son's bedtime stories, and the heavy burden she carried all seemed to converge into this moment. That evening, she returned home feeling a whirlwind of dread and determination. Her son ran to her, wrapping small arms around her legs. Jacob's innocent smile grounded her. Later, Emma sat at her kitchen table with a notebook and pen, trying to prepare. She had never managed budgets or events, but she was ready to learn fiercely. The next morning, Emma arrived at a large office building that housed the foundation's headquarters. She looked around at the sleek decor with a mix of awe and nervousness. A young woman, Claire, approached with a warm smile. Emma? I'm Claire, the program coordinator. Welcome. Claire's easy confidence put Emma at ease as she gave her a quick tour and briefed her on the upcoming event. It was a fundraiser, with scholarship applicants presenting their stories to a panel. Emma was tasked with overseeing the schedule, making sure the venue was prepared, liaising with volunteers, and managing the budget line. The responsibility felt immense, especially with so little time. Throughout the day, she asked questions, took notes, and calmly guided volunteers. When decisions arose, she weighed options thoughtfully rather than panicking. One volunteer commented, "You're doing great. I wasn't sure if you had the experience, but you're a natural at this." Emma smiled, warmth flooding inside. For the first time in a long time, she felt capable and in command. After the event, as the foundation director gave closing remarks praising the hard work, Emma overheard murmurs of approval from the staff. Her participation had clearly exceeded expectations. Later, William Preston arrived to observe her first day. As he watched from a corner, an unreadable expression flickered across his face before softening into a smile. When the event wrapped, he approached Emma. "I must admit, I'm impressed. You handled this remarkably well." Emma met his gaze, a shy but steady smile spreading across her lips. "I've had to be resourceful my whole life." That afternoon, back at the law office, Emma was presented with a set of documents for final review. She took her time, reading carefully, asking questions, and negotiating clarifications. Her knowledge and confidence had shifted from naive skepticism to thoughtful empowerment. As she signed the papers, murmurs bubbled in the corridor outside. The staff whispered among themselves, caught between admiration and surprise. Their expectations had been low, but Emma's poise had overturned those assumptions. William nodded in approval as he looked over the signed forms. This will activate the transfer of assets and your role as the estate's steward. Emma exhaled slowly, the tension in her body easing. In the days following, whispers about the unexpected heiress began to spread beyond the office walls. At her apartment, neighbors who had once watched with suspicion now cast glances tinged with surprise and new respect. Even some who had doubted her integrity seemed hesitant, their earlier judgments softened by genuine astonishment. Emma understood that acceptance wouldn't come easily or quickly, but this first triumph had shifted the narrative. No longer just a struggling woman from a modest neighborhood, she was now a rightful heir, a guardian of a legacy. As she prepared to continue navigating this unfamiliar world, she knew the real challenge was just beginning, balancing her past with the new future she was creating. And in that balance, Emma discovered something vital: strength born from resilience, and dignity forged through the refusal to be defined by others' doubts. Emma stood by the window of her modest apartment, watching the early morning light filter through the thin curtains. The world outside bustled with the sounds of the city stirring awake, but inside, her thoughts drifted back to the days that had brought her here. The inheritance was no longer a distant, abstract notion, it was now something she held in her hands, and with it came a cascade of memories and truths long buried beneath years of hard work and quiet sacrifice. Born and raised in this very neighborhood, Emma had never known luxury or ease. From childhood, she carried the weight of responsibility: a mother who had passed when Emma was young, a grandmother who raised her with fierce love and a protective shroud of silence. Her grandmother, Rose, had been a woman of quiet dignity, always careful with words, especially concerning the family Emma was a part of. She had told Emma stories not of wealth, but of kindness, resilience, and living with integrity despite scarcity. It was only recently, at Rose's passing, that Emma had found a faded leather-bound box buried in the attic. Among the contents were letters and faded photographs linking her to Harold Simmons, a man she now knew was her grandfather. Rose had shielded Emma from relatives who could have torn their family apart for greed. Her simple clothes and humble home were not signs of lost opportunity, they were marks of careful protection. Emma closed her eyes and let the memories wash over her: the afternoon sunlight on Rose's garden, the smell of freshly baked bread, the stories told by candlelight. She thought of Jacob, her little boy, and the future she wanted to craft for him. A future where he wouldn't have to shoulder burdens so early or wonder if belonging meant poverty. Her phone buzzed softly on the table, a message from William Preston. He had grown less formal over the weeks, offering assistance but also demonstrating a change in tone, more respectful, more genuine. "Emma, I scheduled a meeting with the Board of Trustees next week. They're eager to meet you and discuss the Foundation's next projects. Let me know if you need anything." A small smile tugged at her lips. This was no longer just about claims or protests, it was about shaping a legacy her grandfather had left behind, now entrusted to her care. Emma had spent the past weeks learning about the Foundation, immersing herself in its texts and schedules. She had met the trustees briefly, a diverse group of people with varying expectations and hopes. Some eyes held doubt, while others welcomed her presence with subtle endorsements. She recalled one afternoon at the Foundation headquarters when Claire, the program coordinator, invited her into a quiet office. "We know this is a big adjustment," Claire said gently, "but you bring a perspective here that this foundation desperately needs." Emma had nodded, grateful but wary. Change, even positive, carried its own challenges. Her days had become a careful dance, maintaining her job as a tutor in the local center, caring for Jacob, and attending increasingly frequent meetings with lawyers and trustees. Despite the whirlwind, Emma remained grounded, her modest style a quiet contradiction to the polished veneer of the corporate world she now navigated. One evening, back in her apartment, Emma sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea, reflecting on how far she'd come. She could almost see her grandmother's wise smile, feel the strength Rose had passed to her, not just in bloodline but in courage and character. She had debated whether to fully embrace this new identity, the heir to a wealthy estate, or to keep the values of simplicity and authenticity that had shaped her. The answer came slowly but clearly: she would do both. Emma wanted to honor her grandmother's wishes by using the inheritance not to escape her roots, but to uplift the community that had raised her. She began drafting plans for scholarships focused on children like Jacob and others who dreamed of something more. The largest challenge lay ahead, though: the estranged relatives who had long ignored her existence. One afternoon, William Preston called with warnings. "There's been pushback from some family members contesting your claim. They question the legitimacy, the documents, even your involvement," he explained. Emma steeled herself. "I expected no less." The confrontation was inevitable. Their letters and lawyers arrived with blistering accusations and subtle threats. Some saw her as an opportunist, others as a convenient scapegoat. But Emma refused to back down. In a quiet moment before the first family meeting, Emma confided in Sarah during a phone call. "They don't want me here," she said simply. Sarah's voice was encouraging. "Then you have to show them who you really are. You've already proved more than they imagined." That meeting was tense, the room thick with decades-old grievances and suspicion. Emma held herself with calm poise, presenting evidence of her heritage and her plans for the foundation. Some of the relatives bristled, others looked surprised by the strength in her voice and the clarity of her vision. A particularly vocal cousin sneered, "So, you expect us to believe some overworked single mother just steps into this fortune? It's more likely a mistake." Emma met his eyes steadily. "No mistake here. I'm here because I never stopped fighting, even in the silence and the shadows." The room grew quiet, the sharp edges softened by her sincerity. It wasn't acceptance, but it was respect. In the weeks that followed, Emma continued to build bridges cautiously, aware that trust would take time. Her life, once defined by scarcity, was changing in ways she hadn't imagined. Yet, with each step forward, she remained Emma, a fierce mother, a dedicated neighbor, a woman with roots deeper than any fortune could reach. As she tucked Jacob into bed one night, the boy looked up with wide eyes. "Mom, are we really rich now?" Emma smiled, brushing his hair gently. "We have what matters, sweetheart. And we're going to use it to help others, just like you." That night, Emma felt a quiet peace. Not because the battle was over, but because she now knew her place, not just as an heir to an estate, but as a steward of her own story and those who would come after her. The path ahead was filled with uncertainty, but this time, Emma carried the strength of her past and the promise of a future she could shape with intention and heart. The tension that had simmered in the background finally reached a decisive moment when the family holding contested their position with a formal petition. Letters from attorneys arrived at Emma's apartment, thick with legal jargon and accusations that questioned not only the documents she carried but her very right to the heritage. The weight of their disapproval pressed on Emma, but she met it head-on, bolstered by months of preparation and the support she had gained from the Foundation's board and from friends like Sarah. Emma's resolve was not unshakable. There were moments when exhaustion threatened to pull her under. But there was a strength she had discovered that no amount of opposition could erase, a quiet confidence rooted in years of struggle, tempered by the kindness and courage she had cultivated. William Preston, whose demeanor had shifted considerably since their first encounter, was now an ardent ally. During a private meeting in his law office, he offered a sincere apology. "Emma, I want to acknowledge that I was too rigid at the start. I failed to see the person behind the paperwork. But you have proven not only your right but your readiness to lead this legacy with integrity." Emma nodded, appreciating the candor. "Thank you, William. It means a lot to know I'm not fighting this alone." In an unexpected turn, the opposition softened when confronted with Emma's unwavering determination and the legal clarity of her claim. Several relatives withdrew their disputes after private talks mediated by William, and some even expressed regret for their initial skepticism. One cousin, who had been particularly vocal, reached out with a letter expressing remorse. "Emma, I underestimated you. I see now the strength and grace with which you've accepted this responsibility. I hope we can move forward without further conflict." Emma found an unexpected measure of peace in those words. The legal battle, while not completely over, was no longer the looming shadow she had feared. With the inheritance secure, Emma's life transformed not through flamboyant displays, but through purposeful, measured steps. She maintained her modest apartment, refusing to let the sudden change in fortune define her, to cling instead to the values that had grounded her. The foundation became her passion, a realm where she could blend her past and present, offering opportunities to those she knew well, children who dreamed of better futures amid economic hardship. Scholarship applications that once seemed like distant fairy tales were now tangible realities. One autumn afternoon, Emma hosted a gathering in the community center, inviting neighbors, trustees, friends, and even some of the relatives who had reluctantly come to accept her role. The room buzzed with a warm energy, conversations weaving between stories of struggle and hope. Laughter filled the air where once there had been whispers of doubt. As Emma stood before the group, she spoke simply, eloquently. "I never imagined this path would come to me, and I'm still surprised at times," she said. "But I want you all to know that this isn't just about an inheritance. It's about honoring the people who came before us and opening doors for those who will follow." The applause was heartfelt, wrapping around her like a cloak. William stood nearby, nodding with quiet satisfaction. The transformation in his attitude was evident, from a man focused solely on legal formalities to someone who had witnessed the humanity behind the claim. Later, as the night deepened, Emma found herself alone by the entrance. Sarah joined her, smiling. "You've come a long way." "You should be proud," Sarah said. Emma smiled softly, exhaustion and joy mingling. "I am. But more than that, I'm grateful." Sarah looked curious. "What's the next step?" Emma considered the question thoughtfully. "To keep moving forward, for Jacob, for this community, and for myself." In the weeks that followed, Emma balanced her roles with grace: mother, community leader, and steward of a legacy entwined with her own identity. She continued tutoring, staying connected to the world that had shaped her, never wanting to forget where she came from. William's firm handled the remaining legal matters with professionalism and respect, facilitating a smooth transition of ownership and responsibilities. He even arranged for a modest compensation package to acknowledge Emma's patience and to ease the burdens she had borne during the process. One day, as Emma sat at the kitchen table grading papers, a letter arrived, official and respectful, offering a formal apology from the law firm for the initial pressures put on her during those early meetings. The gesture, though small, symbolized the profound transformation in how Emma was perceived. Reflecting on the journey, Emma understood that victory was not merely about financial gain or legal recognition. It was about reclaiming her narrative, rewriting the assumptions others had made about her, and proving that dignity and determination could break through even the most stubborn walls. As dawn crept outside her window, Emma jotted down her thoughts for a speech she would give at the next foundation event. She wrote not as an heiress, but as a woman shaped by resilience and hope. The story of her life, once clouded by hardship and uncertainty, now illuminated a path for others. At the close of the event, Emma invited the gathered guests to share their thoughts on what they would have done in her place. The room filled with stories, laughter, and thoughtful reflection. And as the gathering ended, a calm certainty settled over Emma, the knowledge that she had not just inherited wealth, but a new purpose. The kind of purpose that could transform lives. If this story moved you, don't forget to subscribe. See you in our next story.